The WWE 2K series was full of ups and downs. Of course, it officially started with 2K15, which was universally hated upon its release in 2014. But after that, I wouldn't say any of the games that followed it were bad or anything like that. Worst case scenario, we'd get a game like 2K18, which was just disappointing at best, but nothing that would cause the death of the series as a whole, forcing 2K to start all over again. Fuck. Only 2K could drop one of the greatest WWE games of all time with 2K19 in 2018, then 1 year later drop one of the worst wrestling games we've ever seen. Now there was a lot that went on behind the scenes that led to 2K20's disastrous release in 2019. Yuke's, the longtime developers of the WWE games going as far back as the year 2000, would primarily work with publisher THQ up until 2013 when THQ decided they wanted to try out everyone's favorite pastime, going bankrupt. So after THQ went defunct in 2013, Yuke's would end up working with 2K as they had just taken over as the publisher for the WWE games. So for the next 5 years, Yuke's and 2K would work together on the WWE 2K series of games until Yuke's just couldn't do it anymore. Turns out Yuke's was pretty frustrated with the way 2K was handling the series and would end up leaving in 2019. In August of 2019, 2K announced Visual Concepts would be the new developers of the WWE 2K series going forward, and that same month we get an all-new trailer for 2K20. It was 52 seconds long and featured less than 10 seconds of gameplay. This game was coming out in October and this was all we knew about it. So when 2K20 finally released on October 22nd, 2019, everybody soon realized why 2K had been so secretive about the game for so long. The launch of WWE 2K20 was an absolute disaster. From game-breaking bugs to one of the worst career modes I've ever seen in a wrestling game, WWE 2K20 was just not the wrestling game everyone wanted. In fact, 2K20 was so bad that 2K was pretty much forced to keep the servers up for 2K19 as even they knew nobody wanted to play 2K20. Now, I was one of the lucky ones who skipped out on 2K20 at launch and stuck with 2K19 up until the release of 2K22. So with that, I think it's time I finally give 2K20 a try and find out what exactly made it so bad. Let's start off by talking about the gameplay, because while it could be worse, it's still not good. First of all, everything feels like it has some form of weird input lag to it. It's like I don't have any control over what my superstar does at all, which makes for a miserable experience. This issue affects everything from basic movement to even something as simple as Irish whipping your opponent. On top of all that, this game introduced a brand new control scheme. Why the fuck? What was so wrong with the control scheme of 2K19 in the previous games? They said it was to streamline things, but honestly, I feel this new control scheme only made things more complicated. While I was playing Showcase, the game would tell me to do a specific move, and usually I can do the move on my own with no issues. But because of this new control scheme, I had to check the objectives list constantly to see what exactly I had to do to execute said move. It was always some weird button combination too, like right trigger plus left stick up, and you know what, by that point I've already stopped worrying about what the other buttons are in the combination because I've already taken a hammer to my controller. What makes things worse regarding the gameplay is that weapons feel more restricted than ever before. If you try and place a table in a certain spot that the game just doesn't want you to, rather than automatically placing the weapon in the right spot for you, the game just does absolutely nothing. Now we can't talk about the gameplay without mentioning the fact that this game used to be a buggy mess on release. Now the only reason I say used to is because most of the game-breaking bugs have since been patched. Not to say this game is a flawless masterpiece now, because there's still bugs here and there, specifically with hair, because Jesus Christ, visual concepts and proper hair physics do not work together. The AI in this game still seems to be pretty broken, even 5 years after the game came out, as during my playthrough of the Showcase, Charlotte would end up walking around in circles for no goddamn reason and just would not stop. The only other bug I can think of that I encountered was when I somehow glitched through the Hell in a Cell. This is one of those bugs that actually breaks the game because the match just could not continue. This game at launch was broken as hell and would end up absolutely ruining the game's reputation for the rest of its lifespan. There was even a Y2K bug that prevented you from playing the game when the year changed from from 2019 to 2020. Obviously, this was patched pretty quickly, but for many, this was the final straw. Something I noticed about the gameplay as well is that it feels like a pretty significant step backwards from 2K19 in terms of the speed of the action. It actually feels like a repeat of 2K15 on next gen because my god, everything in this game was so damn slow. It feels like it takes years for strikes to connect, and when you get knocked out, good luck getting back up. Not only is the gameplay slow just in general, but this game lags like hell. Keep in mind, I'm playing this on a Series X, so it should have no issues trying to run this game. We're not even halfway through with this retrospective yet, and I already just wish I was playing 2K19 again. I mean, would you guys really be opposed to a part 2 for the 2K19 video? Because I do, dear god, anything but play 2K20 right now. Alright, enough about the gameplay because I think I've established that this game plays like ass. It's sluggish, slow, clunky, and overall just not fun in the slightest. Now visually, this game is a huge downgrade from even 2K19. WWE2K19 looked absolutely incredible, and somehow they managed to make this game look significantly worse. Some of the faces for certain superstars are just weird looking. Now sure, it's not the worst looking wrestling game by any means, but still, when compared to the game that preceded it by a year, it just looks pretty meh. Well, I need a break from the god-awful gameplay, and the visuals are giving me a headache just from looking at them, so why don't we talk about the roster? Honestly, the roster is pretty much the same as 2K19's. What else do you want me to say? I mean, most all the DLC superstars from 2K19 like Roddy Piper and Bobby Lashley were added to the base roster. Of course, all the notable stars from 2018 were included in the base roster as well, with guys like Shinsuke Nakamura, AJ Styles, and Kevin Owens, just to name a few. Again though, when compared to 2K19, the roster just falls short. 2K19 had 252 superstars in its roster, whereas 2K20 only had 238. That's a pretty significant step back for the roster, and because of that, 2K20's roster just doesn't have a lot going for it. As for match types, the same ones from 2K19 are here, but there is one new match type called Brawls, which I will say is pretty cool at first because of the unique arenas like the Boiler Room for example, but once that coolness wears off and you realize that it's just another version of a backstage brawl, it can get pretty boring very quickly. Now the arena selection is pretty dull in my opinion. Half the arenas are duplicates, like for example you have 2019 Monday Night Raw and 2017 Monday Night Raw, Hell in a Cell 2019 and Hell in a Cell 2016. Look, I'm perfectly fine with a little variety here and there, but I at least want enough unique arenas to outweigh the duplicates. Not only that, but these arenas just aren't all that interesting or appealing to me. I also feel like that's because WWE in general in 2019 didn't appeal to me to begin with, so with that being said, can you really blame me for not being excited about Super Showdown being a playable arena in this game? Speaking of things that didn't appeal to me, let's talk about this game's 2K Showcase. Now this time around, the showcase was centered around the careers of the 4 horsewomen, which of course consists of Bayley, Becky Lynch, Charlotte, and Sasha Banks. It starts around 2014 and 2015 when they were working their way up to the main roster from NXT, and ends with the women's triple threat main event match at WrestleMania 35. Now while there's nothing inherently wrong with the showcase itself, I did find playing through the Women's Revolution to be pretty interesting, but like I said in my 2K19 video about that game's showcase, the matches were just too recent for me to really get into it. I love the Attitude Era mode and 30 Years of WrestleMania mode from WWE13 and 2K14 respectively because they had matches that I wasn't alive to witness, so being able to play through them and see every moment recreated with in-game cutscenes was a pretty cool experience. With Daniel Bryan's showcase from 2K19 and the 4 Horsewomen showcase from 2K20, I watched all these matches as they happened. When this game came out, a lot of these matches were fresh in people's mind, especially the WrestleMania 35 triple threat match. I mean, that happened just a few months before 2K20 even released. So yeah, like I said, the showcase isn't inherently bad, it's just not worth playing like some of the showcases from any of the games older than 2K16. Now alongside 2K Showcase were 2 other modes, 2K Towers and 2K Originals. 2K Towers makes a return from 2K19 and it's the exact same here as it was in that game. The only difference between 2K20's Towers mode and 2K19's is that this time around there's a whole lot more towers to pick from. There's also a Roman Reigns tower, which is kind of like a secondary 2K Showcase in a way. Too bad it's not very good. There's 16 matches and all of which are matches from Roman's career up until that point, going from 2014 to 2019. 2019. Now, while I did say this is like a secondary showcase, it's not a true 2K showcase, as you're not following objectives or trying to recreate whatever match you're playing. You instead play as 2019 Roman Reigns and take on the 2019 versions of every superstar in this tower. The tower itself is fine, but I just didn't really find it to be all that interesting. Then there's 2K Originals, which, well, fuck. So because 2K Originals was DLC, I can't play it since the DLC isn't available anymore. It really sucks too because 2K Originals had a lot of cool content locked behind it, like the Bump in the Night DLC, which featured The Fiend as a playable character. Well, I guess with that, it's time to move on to something I can play. My Player. This game's My Career sucks. Now don't get me wrong, this My Career had potential. A full My Career where the male and female stories were interconnected could have been awesome, but they just had to ruin it with god-awful writing and a horrible story. With this game's limited development time, it's clear they didn't have enough time to write a proper story, so they just came up with this and rushed it out the door. I would explain the story, but there's no possible way for me to explain it and have it genuinely sound interesting, because this story is anything but interesting. The only thing I can tell you is do yourself a favor and skip this game's My Career. Just go play 2K19's instead. It's way better. All in all, WWE 2K20 was and still is pretty bad. Yeah, well, it's not as broken as it used to be. It doesn't excuse the fact that this game just doesn't really have anything going for it. When an entire mode is locked behind a DLC you can't get anymore, the roster is smaller than the game that came before it, not to mention the fact that there is still bugs that will ruin the gameplay experience, it just ends up losing its value after a while. Not that this game had any value to begin with, but you get what I mean. If you can find WWE 2K20 for cheap, that's the only time I'd say it's worth picking this game up. Otherwise, it is just not worth playing in 2024. Honestly, just play 2K19 instead. Or you could play Elder Scrolls Online, because why the hell not? It's way better than 2K20.